Good evening, everyone, and welcome to St. George Classical Academy. It is truly a pleasure to have so many members of our community here, both families who attend St. George, friends of families, and members of the larger community. This evening, we're really excited to have our first ever astronomy night, and I just want to thank First Church Congregational Boxford, as well as the North Shore and the Shore Astronomy Club, who has their telescopes set up out of the field, and they will guide us through some stargazing after James gives the talk. So again, welcome. So Dr. Joyce, my husband James, is an astrophysicist who has worked on numerous NASA missions, including the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, Parker's Solar Probe, and the upcoming IMAP mission. Tonight, we'll get our presentation. It's titled Astronomy, Where the Heavens Meet the Earth, in which he will discuss the ancient understanding of the significance of the heavenly bodies, the role of astronomy as one of the 7 liberal arts, and how the study of the stars fueled the scientific revolution. Welcome, James.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? All right, well, thank you so much for coming. It's really a pleasure to have you all here for Astronomy Night. And again, I want to thank the Amateur Astronomy Club for supporting this event. They're a really great organization that, does a lot of great events like this. So we're really grateful that they're outside getting telescopes ready so we can all put into practice for them to be talking about tonight. So again, I am an astrophysicist. I've worked for several years. I've been blessed by many amazing opportunities to work with incredible teams of people on amazing projects, worked on new scientific discoveries. I've worked on instruments that I later got to observe be launched into space. But tonight I really want to focus on the ancient understanding of the stars and really how, we might see it as in conflict with our modern scientific understanding. I think we can really come to appreciate how the ancient youth's more symbolic understanding of the stars can really enrich our current understanding and fill it with wonder. So that's what I would like to highlight tonight. So I guess we'll begin at the beginnings with Genesis, of course, the creation of the heavenly bodies. And this is really, I think we can really view this as a gift of God towards man, which really establishes the regularity of nature, and it really sets the tone for patterns of our behavior. Of course, the rising and the setting of the sun is something that has shaped human behavior for all of time. We wake up when the sun rises. We tend to go to bed as it sets. Of course, that's been disrupted by the invention of modern electric light. Of course. Not necessarily to our benefit. To understand our ancient agrarian societies would really be shaped by the rising and the setting of the sun, and also by the seasons, which really are captured by the motions of the stars. Different constellations are visible at different times of the year, and so people were able to, capture their understanding in time by gazing up at the stars at night. And in this way, we can really understand that the heavenly bodies are really sort of an icon or an image of time that really points to a sort of transcendent order that's been given to us. So this is a quote from St. Basil on the human condition. I'm just going to read it to you. I think it's a really beautiful description of man and his place in the cosmos. So St. Basil says, God created you upright. He gave this special structure to you as distinct from the rest of the animals. Why? Because the activity he intended to get you is also special. For they are grazing animals, and they are structured in accord with the things toward which they aim by nature. The sheep was created to go to pasture. It has its head inclining downward, looking at the stomach and the parts below the stomach, since the fulfillment of happiness for these animals is filling the stomach and enjoying pleasure. But the human being no longer looks toward the stomach, but his head is lifted high toward things above, so that he may look up to what is akin to him. I think this, again, is such a beautiful description of man. Of course, the things in the stomach are important, and we need to care for these things and make sure that we can feed ourselves and our families. But really, man is made to gaze upward towards the heavens and to understand his place in transcendent realities. Whereas, the rest of the created creatures, they look downward. They're focused on living in the moment and how they can sort of satisfy their own low passions. But man really is the mediator between the things on earth, the animals, and the heavens. And so he's put in this place where he is meant to care for the creatures of the earth and to really connect them to the heavenly reality. And so this really brings us to the ancient understanding of the cosmos. So, of course, again, people didn't used to have electric light, so they'd spend a lot of time at night gazing up at the stars. And as they would look into the stars, they would discover these patterns of meaning. They would begin to connect the stars into shapes, and they would connect them to stories, to myths, to heroes, Hercules, and Orion, and Ares. So they would discover meaning in the seeming random orientation of the stars in the sky, and they began to really ascribe importance and meaning to what they observed. And this really shows the difference between our modern society and the ancients. So the ancients had sort of a top-down view of the world, but they really truly believed that the stars influenced their life on Earth and that they were connected in a very meaningful way. Whereas we tend to have a bottom-up view. We tend to think of DNA, genetics, molecules, microbes, things like this are things we can't even see, but they affect us in deeply profound ways. And of course, that's true, and we know that scientifically. But the ancients had this top-down view, and I think there's actually truth to it. And of course, at times they could take this too far. The practice of astrology, where they would use the stars to make predictions, or they would have beliefs that the stars they were born under had some sort of deterministic effect on their destiny and who they were meant to be as people. And of course, in modern science, we would say, this is superstition, it's not scientific. And of course, Christians rejected it for a different reason. And the reason really is that we are called to be who we are by the Creator and not the creation. So we're meant to contemplate the Creator and to commune with Him. And that's how we determine what the future has in store for us, not by communing with the heavenly things. But I do think it's important to say that we do actually believe that all of God's creation is connected in a meaningful way. And we see this in many profound ways. The stars actually, in some sense, can't affect who we are as human beings. For example, if you look at the National Hockey League and you look at their birthdays, you will notice almost all of them are born in January or in February or maybe some in March. And that's, it's a very interesting thing to observe. And it's not necessarily because being, an Aquarius makes you an elite hockey player. But, there is something. But what this points to is that the circumstances of our birth they do actually impact us. And there's actually a very rational and scientific reason for this, which I'm not going to explain to you. But if you're interested, you could look into that later, why hockey players have such a unique distribution of their birth. And we can understand how the circumstances of our birth affect us. In the winter, there's not as much light, and it affects our moods. We talk about seasonal affective disorder. People are a little bit down. You can understand how somebody born in the winter, might be affected differently. The mood of their parents might impact them. The vitamin D levels that we get from sunlight might impact, how they develop nutritionally. And, many scientific studies have shown this. So, again, the circumstances, we really are connected in all these ways. The motion of the stars really is profoundly important. So next I want to talk about sort of the reverse. We have this image of order of the heavens, and then we have the image of water, which, historically in ancient times and in the scriptures it sort of represents chaos because water is without a definite form. It moves around. There's an element of mystery to it. And this, again, is really present in the symbolism of all ancient cultures. But even though it sort of represents chaos and formlessness, it also can be associated with potential and creation and birth. So the lack of form indicates that it could be turned into something. Of course, we see that in Genesis when, before the creation of the world, it's without form and void, and the Spirit of God is upon the water. So water is sort of present, and it represents this potentiality of what can be. And this brings us to, of course, the act of going out to sea, which really, you can imagine, going out to sea even today is quite dangerous. The sea is unpredictable. Storms can arise at any time. It's very easy to capsize a ship if you don't know what you're doing. And you can imagine what immense faith it would have taken in ancient times for people to go out into the sea in the face of all this uncertainty and danger. But of course, the sea also represents a tremendous amount of potential. It represents trade. You can gather food, by fishing. You can explore. You can make new discoveries. So the sea is sort of this alluring thing. There's a potential, but it's also very dangerous. And again, we see this highlighted in the scriptures. In the Gospels, the apostles are fishermen. So they really are people who are called out of safety through faith to, reach their potential. And so, again, the sea it's a very unpredictable place. It does have patterns, like we do observe the tides, which, interestingly is caused by the gravitational attraction of the moon. So there is that connection there. But the sea does have tides. We do the sea has patterns, and we study them as scientists, but they're not as obvious as the heavenly patterns, which are regular and constant. And so, of course, when man went out to sea in the face of this danger, his recourse was but to observe the heavenly patterns and have them guide him in the face of chaos. And, I really think this is analogous to our own lives, which at times can seem chaotic and unpredictable, and we don't know what's going to happen. And we similarly look towards heavenly patterns to guide us. As Christians, we look towards Scripture, and in particular, the life of Christ as a constant, as a transcendent heavenly pattern that guides us in our life, and that, by analogy, we can see meaning in the seeming chaos of our lives. So this brings us, of course, St. George Classical Academy is a classical school, and so we make an effort to emphasize the 7 liberal arts. I think when people think of the liberal arts, they tend to think of the humanities. So there are 3 language arts, which many people might know: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. But lesser known and lesser explored, even in light of this new classical movement that we have that's growing, is the 4 mathematical arts, also known as the quadrivium. So these are arithmetic, which is the art of discrete number, really the art of counting, of operating, manipulating numbers, doing calculation, finding patterns. I think that's a very obvious mathematical art to everybody. Geometry, of course, shapes, relationships, space. It's really the study of continuous magnitudes. Music is one that people might not necessarily think of mathematical, but of course, it's all about numbers, really, when you begin to study music theory. So when we think of music traditionally, we're thinking about vibrations, we're thinking about waves, sound waves. And when we listen to music, what we're listening to really is the relationship between the frequencies of these waves. So, we have discrete frequencies which form a scale, and music really is the art of arranging them harmoniously in melodies and harmonies in a way that's pleasing to our ears. So it's very mathematical in that way. And then, of course, finally, astronomy is it's really can be thought of in connection to geometry, much like music is sort of taking math and bringing it into time and manifesting it. Astronomy is kind of similar in geometry. It's really geometry in motion. So, we're understanding the planets. We have shapes, we have orbits, ellipses. You use triangulation to to measure things. So this is really the place of astronomy in a liberal arts education. And so we can understand that there was immense practical value in observing the stars in terms of navigation and orienting people in the world and being able to keep track of time and all these kinds of things. And over time, people became so adept at making these observations. They began to develop models which could accurately predict things, even like solar eclipses, very rare phenomena that people could predict very precisely, even using ancient models which would now be considered out of date. One of my favorite examples is we actually have a record of sunspots, which people kept very carefully going back hundreds of years. And sunspots we now understand are sort of an analog for solar activity. I studied solar storms in graduate school. So we would actually use these records, these observations of people very carefully made over the course of hundreds of years. And it's a great asset for us. But I think you really have to admire the dedication that these people had to make these very detailed and careful observations, even though they didn't necessarily understand the implications that they would have even hundreds of years later. And so the ancients, they viewed the heavens really as this ordered, transcendent reality, and with very ordered patterns of motion and relationships between the stars. And that's really in contrast with the everyday world, which they viewed as chaotic and fleeting and characterized by change. And so as the astronomy developed and they developed their observational capabilities and their ability to discern the heavenly patterns, they began to apply those skills to the world around them. And this has really led to the development of what we call physics. So the idea that even in the seeming chaos around us, there's actually order. And by careful observation and using inductive reasoning, we can discern the order in the seeming chaos around us. So this brings us to a great example. Kepler, who was, of course, a great astronomer. And so he was really inspired by this ancient conception of the music of the spheres. So the ancients had this, again, they had this wonder when they looked at the stars that the heavenly bodies were really sort of a symphony, acting in accord with each other, or moving, almost like a dance. And Kepler was, very much inspired by this, and he began to sort of apply the art of music to his astronomical understanding. You can see here he came up with his Kepler's 3 laws of motion, of planetary motion. One of which is that the period of the planets was proportional to the semi-major axis of the planet, or essentially its average distance from the sun. So again, this is a way that he sort of saw nature as musical, harmonious, and this really began to build momentum among scientists. And of course, the next example that I'm going to call upon is Newton, who of course came up with his theory of gravity, which is shown here, the relationship of gravitational force being proportional to the mass of 2 objects. And this is really a very profound thing, because this, again, Newton is one of the giants of the modern scientific world, although in some sense he's been surpassed by Einstein. But this equation is really remarkable, because what it points to really is, it points back to this ancient understanding of the universe as a cosmos and not just a collection of random dust. The idea that every single atom in the universe has a connection and they attract each other in this way. It's really a very profound discovery. And again, it's really is inspired by this ancient understanding of astronomy and the music of the spheres. So what is the practical value for astronomy in our lives? And why do we want to teach our children the liberal art of astronomy? Well, some of the habits that astronomy really teaches us is attention, the ability to make careful observations and to use reason to draw conclusions from them, to take precise notes. And it really, of course, teaches patience, because you cannot force these things to happen. You have to wait. You have to observe them over time. You have to think about them and really think about what you're seeing and what the implications are. And really, the great importance of this is that it teaches us to see patterns of meaning, not just in the stars, but in our own lives. And that's really the true value that I believe we get from astronomy. And I think there's a beautiful sort of analogy to this in the Gospels of the three wise men, or sort of mysterious figures. It's not clear exactly who they are. They're kings or perhaps astrologers. It's not. We don't have a great description of them. But what we do know is that their careful observation of the heavens led them to follow this sort of anomalous star that they observed. And of course, it led them to our Lord, the true source that unifies the heavens and the earth. So I think this really points to the way that we need to really carefully observe our own lives and find the patterns of meaning that are present in them. And we need to look towards the heavens really to orient ourselves in the cosmos and find what our place is in the universe. And so with that, I'm going to direct you all to find your own way in the night sky. We're going to go outside and do some observation. We're going to do some astronomy. We've got, just again, some telescopes set up. We have binoculars. You can look up into the sky, observe what patterns you see, and what constellations you're able to observe. So again, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed doing some astronomy outside.
Thank you, James. So the way that the next portion of the evening will work is... Actually, I'm going to back up for just a moment. I want to say a couple of things about St. George Classical Academy. As many of you know, we just launched on September 4th with pre-K through 8th grade, and we have had a wonderful first couple of months of school. It has truly been beautiful. We are so grateful to be on this property and to just be placed here in a beautiful the beautiful natural world. So it's been a really wonderful experience. I want to invite those who might be interested in taking a tour of the school next to meet Mrs. Duros by the back doors. And she's going to bring a group of people next door where we occupy the educational wing, so where our classrooms are. So anybody who would like to join her when we move into the next phase can certainly do that, and then they can come onto the backfield for some stargazing. The rest of us are welcome to first pick up your children, because you have to supervise them outside in the dark, and we are going to head out to the field, and I believe that there are 8 telescopes set up there. Brewster, who oversees the North Shore Amateur Astronomy Club, is going to give a quick presentation about how to use the telescope, what you might be looking for, how to orient yourself into the sky. I will share with you that at St. George, we've been reading books together and talking about it. There is so much that you can see with the naked eye. And so the children have been exploring constellations. We've learned about the autumn sky and how, the stars, how there are different stars in different seasons. So you can see a lot even as you wait to use the telescope. And we also have binoculars available for those, probably more adults because they're actually hard to use. I will ask that you try to minimize all light, because the light pollution, it actually makes it hard for your eyes to adjust, and the club has asked that we minimize light. So for example, cell phones and things like that, your eyes will adjust. I have a handful of flashlights with red light on them, so those who might need some assistance, I'd ask they can take the flashlights first. Let's leave those for some of the older people or those with young children. And again, you can help yourself to refreshments, so we will move outside into the next phase. So thank you so much all for being here.